Hello, BookTube. Well, as you can see, I have a guest in addition to in addition to herself. I have a guest. This is my friend Zach from the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston.
Everybody.
Care to give newcomers to the channel a really quick 30-second thumbnail of the Brattle?
Sure. Yeah, so the Brattle Bookshop is a used and rare bookshop in downtown Boston. Um, we have 3 floors of books inside our shop and an outside sale area with book carts and book stalls where we sell sale books Monday through Saturday, as long as it's not raining. You'll often see Steve outside, um, looking, well, usually in the morning before the crowds get too dense like they are today on a Saturday. But we're one of the few places still left that sell both a good used and sort of general used book stock and rare and antiquarian books at the same location.
And more to the point, for our discussion today, you also buy those things.
Well, that's how one of the most common questions we get from people is where do the books come from? And the simple answer is no, we don't take book donations. Everything that we have for sale in the shop, one way or another, we have bought. Usually from a person, occasionally from the United States government, but usually from a person.
And that means the shop is always going out on buys. You've been on innumerable buys yourself.
Yes.
Yes.
So house calls, appointments at various libraries or institutions, looking at lots at an auction, all kinds of places.
I would imagine that those can range from very smooth and businesslike to nightmarish. If you've got rickety stairs to climb, or lots of stairs to climb, or lots of rickety stairs to climb.
Yes, so certainly there are physical perils, and just you can imagine if you're making house calls. We do buy a lot of estates as well, so oftentimes viewing books without their owner present, but we walk into all sorts of situations, from again the perfectly reasonable to the all on the other end of the spectrum, really really terrible or dangerous hoarder situations. Certainly the structural integrity of houses and buildings have been issues in the past, not just because of the weight of many thousands of books, but occasionally because of the weight of many thousands of books.
Now, before we get on to our main subject, I gotta pursue the hoarder thing there. I would not expect the hoarder to call you. Is it always made on behalf of someone else?
Yes. When the few situations that I've been to that were really difficult hoarding situations, it's always been in a state.
Ah, okay. So the heart is not there anymore.
The person, who lived there, who accumulated all of the stuff, had either moved to a different physical location or moved on more generally. So
is it only an urban myth that usually when a hoarder moves on to a different metaphysical location instead of a physical location, it's because their own collection killed them? Is that an urban myth?
It has to have happened at some point, but again, I think it's one of those, has anyone ever seen someone slip on a banana peel?
Right.
It may only happen in cartoons.
The standard joke here on BookTube is that if you've got gigantic piles of books and you're running the risk that they will one day kill you, the standard joke on BookTube is, well, that's the way I want to go.
Sure.
There's no fear of it at all.
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, it's almost certainly not going to happen that way. As someone who has been caught in an avalanche of, I don't know, 12-foot high book stacks, it can hurt, but it's probably, unless you get really unlucky, or have some serious underlying issues, it's probably not going to kill you.
I would think the stairs down to the basement where you are now would represent a greater danger than the books do.
Yeah, well,
Pretty frightening.
I would, yes, that's right. I have injured myself on stairs a couple times. But that's more me than the stairs. They're perfectly, if anyone from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is listening, stairs are perfectly safe.
See, this
No
is why
danger
in
at all.
employment situations that I have had where an employer has asked me to do anything more than simply blarney, my response has been, I would prefer not to. Straight out of Melville. I would prefer not to.
That's right.
They're mystified by it. They were always, but in addition to going out in the van, going out to estates and houses and whatnot, the Brattle also takes, people can come. It can happen in the other direction, and that had a seismic
Yes.
change with the pandemic, right?
So, certainly, we used to invite walk-ins with anywhere up to a few hundred books to just show up during business hours. Certainly, it was always helpful to give us a call, let us know you were coming, so we could hopefully vet what you're planning to offer us.
Because there's a good likelihood that it will be a wasted trip, right? That it won't be anything you want.
I wouldn't say a good likelihood, but I after you hinted that since the pandemic has come and kind of gone, but not really.
Really
But
know.
anyway, since the pandemic showed up, we've changed that policy to where now you do need an appointment. You do need to get in touch with us so we can vet those books before they come into the shop. And it does, I suppose, save everybody's time, a decent percent of the time. I wouldn't say half, but maybe somewhere between a quarter and a third. We're able to give someone alternate suggestions, whether it be donation or something else. We can let them know that
a
just
quarter
not
or a
interested
third,
in
a significant portion is just, this isn't for us. We don't make
isn't for
we don't
us.
want it.
Yep.
But
Right.
people can still make, I used to bring in books myself. I used to bring in a bag of books myself. But I prefer having the shop come to me so that Frida can scream at whoever's coming up.
Although I feel a little, I don't know how it makes me feel exactly, but she doesn't even really bother with me anymore. Just a few perfunctory, jumps and scratches, and then this guy.
Yeah, just she gives you a perfunctory mauling, and then she isn't interested.
But her heart's not in it. You can tell.
No, it's true. But then again, doesn't that mirror the evolution of reactions to Zach just in general?
I think
Among
that's
all
right.
species. Well, at the time I screamed at you myself.
That's
that was
true.
a long time ago. Oh my god! But I don't do it anymore because it's more convenient for you to come out here. But people do still do. They do still call, make appointments, and oftentimes they get the go ahead to come into the shop. I've been there when people have come in. And that gets us to our subject today, which is how to handle that encounter.
Yes.
You have had, once again, innumerable encounters like that, where you have been the person at the pricing table when the person comes in.
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that some people handle their end of that encounter better than others?
That is very fair. I will say the majority of people are perfectly fine. But one thing that I always notice when people do it, because it is the best way to start, is when people come in, they ask what they can do, which is a great way to start sort of any encounter when you're offering something to in a professional environment. And because usually I'm more than willing to give 3 or 4 directions that'll make the whole transaction go very smoothly. You know, even if it's something like, okay, please put those boxes over here. I'm going to take a couple minutes to go through, and then I can tell you about what I see. Um, One of the most difficult to deal with things that people do, and this happens a lot, is they want to sort of look over my shoulder and sort of hand me each book individually. Um,
Now, why
you
is
know,
that? Is that because they have convinced themselves that they know about their books?
well, yes, and oftentimes that's it. They're convinced that you know that I'll miss something, that they want to make sure that that I treat their books properly, and whatever their conception of properly is, they want to try to sort of impose that. Which on one hand I understand. I certainly have um, I have my relationship to my books is important. Um, I have pretty strong feelings about how they should be treated. But again, it's frustrating for me because I do this a lot, and I sort of have a standard um, a standard protocol for going through
And that protocol, I've
whatever the
seen that
group of
protocol
books
many
is.
times. It's the soul of enthusiastic courtesy. It's not like you're treating them brusquely and they need to correct things.
Absolutely not. Um, because, well, for one thing, I'm interested in looking at books. If all I did was stand at the front of the shop and people brought in bags of books for me to look at all day, I'd be perfectly happy. Um,
But there's a
and that
key distinction that you need to make to
What's
people,
that?
right? Between that, there is a difference between the value your books once had to you and the value they will have to a commercial shop.
That's
Difference
exactly right.
between those two things.
Yeah, and I think also mixed up in that is sort of the um, unquantifiable value of a text or a work of literature and the physical form
Yeah,
it takes that you're bringing to me to have its value assessed. And I think that aspect of it um, gets mixed up too. I've
it's
had so many people offer me piles of books and have just sort of an ordinary edition, say, of a Hemingway novel. I'll pick somebody I know you don't like. Um, and they'll say, oh, well, this is a great book. And from from the point of view that they're taking, it probably is. But that copy isn't, and that edition isn't. And it just it's very difficult when to get past that divide, because usually what I'm assessing and what they think they're presenting are very different things, even different categories of things.
and books are so personal, right?
Yeah,
It's not like they're selling a piece of an end table.
right.
Books are
Right.
so personal. So I've heard you make that point and stress it, that what
Yeah,
this book means to you personally is a different thing from
yeah,
what it will mean to me assessing it.
yeah,
But
yeah. And very often I sort of open with that because the kind of person that we were just talking about, you can usually sense that in the way they approach the transaction, um, just sort of how they introduce their book or their books. You can tell that this is something that they have a lot of emotional capital invested in. So off the top, oftentimes I will say, you know, look, I just want to make sure you understand that what I'm assessing here is is a very narrow thing. I'm talking only about its, monetary resale value. I'm not uh, I'm really not being a critic in any other way. Because when I am looking at books, it can seem like a pretty cynical activity. What I'm doing is I'm looking for flaws. I'm looking for problems with these books, whether it be a valuable first edition or antiquarian book, or somebody's trade paperback of a classic. I'm looking for everything that might be wrong with that book. And that's just sort of the nature of the business. If there's something that's going to make that book not sell, I need to know about it.
I'm sure that everyone listening to you right now wants to know about worst case scenarios because there will be that rare customer who isn't willing to take your word for it.
Yes.
So you'll be that rare customer who says, I already know how much this is worth. I basically just want you to write me a check for the amount that I will tell you. You get some of those, right? People who
get some of those, and that's another attitude that usually if someone is coming in with it, you can smell it on them. and try to massage.
I'm always just grateful that the smelling's not coming from me. If anybody will take the spotlight, the olfactory spotlight from me, that's fine.
That's right. And that actually, it can be a little frustrating, but that doesn't really bother me so much because I can understand people, just being wrong about something. And really all you can do in that scenario is say, look, this is my opinion, but it's just my opinion. You can certainly go get another one. And try to end it as quick as possible.
What about the worst of the worst case scenarios where you say that what you just said is very diplomatic? This is my assessment. I'm giving the assessment for the shop. You might be able to find a different assessment somewhere else. You're welcome to go somewhere else. What about when that worst case scenario gets even worse and the person wants to talk to the owner?
Yes, that's right.
I have noticed over the years that, the owner of the Brattle is a man named Ken Gloss, and he is the soul of friendly genealogy. And if there's one thing I've noticed that will irk him,
yes,
when a customer insists that his employees don't know what they're talking about.
Yes, or
we should stress,
and that bothers
who might be listening, if that is a bad strategy at the Brattle.
Yeah, it is a really bad strategy. I will say that bothers him. I've seen him have more, I'll even say angry reactions to that than when someone says he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Much more.
He just rolls with it when they say, he knows what he's talking about, so that he just rolls with it. It's when a customer implies that or says outright that his employees don't know what they're talking about. That seems
a couple times actually. I've had somebody, completely dismiss what I say. Said I want to talk to the owner, and I'll sort of say I don't think that's necessary. Again, trying to keep it as diplomatic as I can, because that's usually a pretty brusque exchange.
Yes.
Yes. Appropriately too, because what I always hope people understand when they come in is we're not making this stuff up. Yes, all of this pricing and buying, it is subjective, but it's an opinion. But it's an opinion in my case with 20 plus years of doing it behind it, and it's with Ken 2.5 times that or 3 times that. Usually,
and it won't work in your favor.
Yeah.
Long ago, before you started at the store, a customer came in with boxes and boxes of books. He was talking to a young woman who doesn't work at the store anymore. I have to believe that the fact that she was a woman had a lot to do.
Oh,
he got
it almost always
stiffer, more and more bristly. Finally, she finished up. I was standing right there. As viewers might not know, I often just loiter around the pricing table or anywhere else, as if I were invited. I just sort of loiter and stare. Oh, what are you talking about? Yeah. There's nothing they can do about it. They've tried every city ordinance in the book. But I was just standing there, and she got to the point where she said, well, there is stuff that we can use here. I'm thinking $100. Yeah. And at the time, that was an amount of money. And he went through all the stuff that you're talking about. was completely bristling, pretty much said, you don't know what you're talking about, pretty much said, I'd
Yeah.
really like to talk to the owner. Is he here? And she
Yeah.
said to him, well, that's not going to go well for you, but if
Yeah.
you want, he's on the third floor, I'll get him down here.
Yeah.
And it's like you say, you can sense it off these
Yeah.
customers
Well, and
before the man had said a word. And,
yeah.
and then the man went on, he interrupted the woman who was doing the assessing
Yeah.
to say, I just think these are worth a lot more. And Ken looked at them, didn't touch them, and said, we don't want them at all. So $100 went to zero. You can pack them up and go. We're not taking
Yeah.
them at all. That's
Yeah.
there's nowhere to go after that.
Yeah. Well, and you touched on one thing that I'll highlight a little more. I used to be very frustrated when I was buying books, and this is thankfully doesn't happen very much anymore. But I used to get frustrated because people didn't really take me seriously because I was a lot younger than, I've been, again, 15 years ago. I looked like I might not know what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Um,
Now you're like something out of the Great Pyramids of Giza.
yeah, now not
once upon
an
a time,
issue.
yes. Once upon a time, you were youthful.
and I used to find that very frustrating. But that is nothing compared to what the women at the shop have had to deal with when they're giving giving an assessment of books and dealing with people who don't take them seriously because they're a woman. And I wish I could say it doesn't happen as much as it used to, but it still kind of does. And it's just, it's really frustrating for me. I can't imagine how it is for someone who's actually trying to be a professional.
Especially when it doesn't take long listening to the employees at the Brattle before you realize they do, in fact, know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and
that would get through, but it doesn't.
And it is. I mean, there's with books. There's always too much to know for someone to know everything. So we try not to get out over our skis. If I don't know something, I'll say I don't know. I'll say I'll go do a little research, or I'll ask someone else for an opinion. But if I'm only going to give information if I feel pretty confident in that.
Now, two other scenarios here.
Yeah.
That I want to pursue. All right, so let's say a customer brings in 6 boxes of books, and they aren't what was described. Nothing nefarious, no deceit involved. It's just now that you're looking at them, you can see the original pictures, the original description really didn't do these justice. We really don't want these. Sorry that you made an appointment, but we really don't want these. What happens when the customer says, well, you can have them. I don't want to take them back. Because you said already you don't take donations.
We don't take donations.
You don't take books that you can't do anything with.
Yeah. In that scenario, there are a couple things you could do. One, if there's something we can do, if there are some that we could possibly sell, I'll make a courtesy offer, even if it's something that'll just barely cover the expense of the dumpster pickup that they'll contribute to, or if it's essentially what we'll be able to realize from selling the group, just because no harm on either side.
Right.
They took their time to bring it in. That seems fair.
And what about the other scenario? Well, that must sometimes happen, where a customer brings in books and it turns out there's a lot more there than they thought, a lot more than you thought, until you see them.
Well, in that case,
that must be.
being transparent is important in any scenario. Being transparent in that scenario is fun. Can be fun because you get to point out and say, look, this is what this is, and it's actually fairly valuable. Here's what I think here's what I think a retail price is. Here's what I think I can offer. And oftentimes they'll say, why is that? And you can tell them a little about the book, and they're, and it's a happy exchange. Now, that doesn't happen terribly often, but sometimes it does. And that's a fun exchange.
It seems to me that one of the details that's common to that moment is that whoever is doing the assessing, whether it's you or anybody else, they will say, I want you to wait here a minute while I look things up. A lot of times it's not from memory. It's I always want, I never say anything, but I always want to say to the customer, if they're checking research material, you're in luck.
That's a good sign. Yeah, well, because what we're usually doing there is it'll be, well, for instance, somebody last week brought in, and they had sent information ahead during the vetting process, when we made up, when we made their appointment, but they brought in a signed literary first edition by a poet who didn't sign too many of these books. And once I saw it in person and saw that the signature was genuine and like that, I did take it down to the basement, down right where I am now at this computer. And usually what I'm doing there is checking two things. One, checking recent auction records for similar items. In this case, similar copies of that edition of the book signed, just to see where they've sort of gone at auction. Auction records, as opposed to copies that are currently for sale, are nice because you know that in auction record that book actually did sell at a price. If you're looking at, say, A Books or Biblio or Via Libri, and you see a copy of a book for sale, you may be able to get a sense of what the value is, but the one thing you do know is that book has not sold at that price.
Right, because it's still there.
So I was checking auction records to see where that type of book has sold in the somewhat recent future, and also seeing if there are any available at the moment. For that reason, because even if you have a desirable rare book and you see that 3 other book dealers have similar copies at the moment, you know that the prices they're asking might not be a realistic, or at least not realistic within a reasonable time period price.
So that would guide the offer that you make?
That would absolutely guide the offer, because what I'm trying to decide is what I think I can sell it at. And depending on what that price is, it can offer a percentage. For rare books, oftentimes it's in the 40 to 60%.
Okay, but a search like that would never yield a result that would cause you to just not take it at all, would it?
Oh no, not if it's something. No,
if it's something that's actually collectible, you would take it somehow.
Yes, that's right. We'd make an offer somehow, and that's it might be, but it certainly is affected by things like auction records and things like current availability.
Sorry about the weird lighting. It's
no, that's okay.
It's
no, I like it.
It's
you look kind of spooky. You should start saying some ominous things.
I'll be over to the shop later today. It doesn't get more ominous.
See, I know that, but I know that's a lie.
No, I won't be coming over.
Monday
afternoon on a weekend,
20, that's a legitimate threat.
An afternoon on the weekend? Oh
yeah, no. You're not. No, you're almost certainly not wearing pants right now, and have no intent of putting them on.
I was at the shop on a weekend. I think I had a guest in town, so I was at the shop on a Saturday in the middle of the afternoon. I was out in the sale lot, and a guy walked by with, I guess, his girlfriend, and said, look at all these books. God, I love reading," and kept walking. Yeah. So, Exhibit A, Your Honor, that you just perjured yourself. You do not. Who loves books and does that?
So, well, let me tell you, you've given me a few scenarios. Let me tell you about one scenario that this actually frustratingly came up with me on a buy last week. I had made an offer on a group of 300 or 400 books. Nice books. I made certainly a fair offer. And basically the people said, oh, we're, it was an estate situation. And they said, well, we're selling the house, and we want, or the realtor wants to keep a bunch of books on the shelves just for staging purposes while we sell the place. So we'll consider your offer and see what the realtor wants to do. So they got back to me a few days later saying, we're happy to accept the offer. And the realtor wants to clear some space. So if you want to come and, take the books you're most interested in, we could do that and then get the rest of them once the house sells, which is something we do pretty frequently. So I show up, I pull off maybe 2 boxes of books, which cleans up the shelves a little so that they can be rearranged for the staging. And then I say, okay, these are the ones I want to take now. I can pay you for the whole group and we'll get the rest later. And they basically said, yeah, well, I think we changed our mind and we're going to try and sell the books ourselves. And essentially what I did was came over and I told them what the most valuable books are. And basically gave them sort of a free appraisal of their library so that they could go and try and sell them on their own, which is frustrating on a lot of levels.
Hey. Good Lord.
But
Cheek.
also it's, I think a lot of people have sort of misconceptions about how much work it takes to sell books, especially if you're trying to do it, outside of a shop. If you're trying to, say, sell books online, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, Amazon and eBay and sites like that downplay that element. They encourage people.
They certainly do. Even if you're just selling sort of a relatively recent book or a textbook that has, it has ISBN numbers, you can, do a lot of it sort of in an automated way. Even that's a lot of work. To catalog an antiquarian book or sort of a modern first edition and do it in a way that a potential buyer is going to be convinced that you're a competent bookseller.
It's beyond most people's capacity.
Is a lot of work, and it takes some experience to do.
So what about we have a limited amount of time left. I want one other scenario, the very rare scenario in which something comes into the shop that is beyond the shop's capacity. Do you ever have someone come in and you assess the book, maybe come down, look up things online and realize we can't offer it, make a fair offer for this. This person should bring this to a major auction house? Or do you ever refer the book upward, is what I'm saying?
Sometimes. More often, I'll try to include a colleague who's a specialist in something. So either refer this person who brought the book in directly to them, or more likely get in touch with the colleague and sort of pick their brain and maybe make an offer to buy it together and sort of go in on the deal.
That's an important reminder, right? Is that when it comes to the professional circuit here of assessing and selling and dealing in books, the Brattle knows everybody and everybody knows the Brattle, right? So,
and there's no better resource than enlisting a colleague who's a specialist in some particular type of material. It's really good for business, but it's also it really is a network that it's good to sort of minimize risk on sort of an expensive item, but it's
and an interesting detail about that network, something it's been implied throughout this conversation, but I think it bears saying directly, is that this is a network that is absolutely looking for the best deal for the customer.
That's right.
Who knows the least of what's going on. in most
Mhm.
networks, if the customer is the mark, and that
Yeah,
is not
that's
what it's
that's
driving
right.
here at all.
Yeah,
That's fascinating.
yeah, that's right.
So,
Well, because yeah, the shop I think has a pretty good reputation um, as buyers of books, but there really is um,
put it mildly, yes.
yeah. Well, I
How
hope
many
so.
times have you bought books from me, you or your predecessors bought books from me, and then told me the next time I come in the shop, we're revising the estimate upward?
Yeah,
That doesn't
right.
happen in other professions. That's happened to me many times.
Yeah, but I think that's really important because there's just sort of such a knowledge imbalance usually between sellers and buyers in this particular business, that if you're not transparent, if you're not sort of open about, if I'm not open about what I'm thinking and how I'm going to treat the material, then the person can really, have some uncertainty. Am I getting, am I getting a raw deal here? Am I getting taken advantage of?
So, so we have a minute and a half to go here. If
Okay.
you boil down this discussion, do you have any quick pieces of advice for bookshop courtesy? Some
Uh,
basic pieces of advice,
yeah, I'd say if you're,
like you want to tell
especially if
people
it's not,
listen
if
rather
you're,
than talk.
yeah, well, if you're, yeah, that's right. Or just ask questions. Um, I'm more than, whether it's somebody coming in to browse for the first time or selling books for the first time, if you're not familiar with the process, um, ask me, ask someone here. We're very familiar with the process. We can usually walk you right through it. Um, I think that's the best advice for somebody who either coming into the shop for any reason, I suppose.
Yeah. So don't come in dictating terms
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
like you would anywhere else. Remember
Right.
that you're the customer, that you're dealing with experts.
Yeah, I think that's important. And if we get off on that foot, I think it's going to go really smoothly.
Well, I'm pretty sure that all of our listeners want to go to the Brattle, so now they all know.
Yeah,
They all know to
come
behave
in,
themselves.
say hello. We'll show you around
And I'll
and
be
maybe buy your
loitering
book.
somewhere. I'll be loitering